Spain, the civilization that came to the New World to destroy all the peoples that lived there. But what would you say if I show you in this speech that this narrative is false? It is a myth. It's important to understand the Spanish colonization of America to get a better view of this historical period. We can look at the historical evidence and study why of the Spanish behavior with the indigenous people. This will help us to get a more detailed understanding of the situation. Despite what many people believe, there is not historical evidence that shows the Spanish authority have a clear intention to wipe out the indigenous people. The Spanish Empire had different goals. They interacted with the indigenous civilizations in various ways and implement laws to safeguard and maintain indigenous cultures and rights. I am a person with a great interest in history and with a great interest in the historical period that marks a before and after in the history of humanity, for better or for worse. So I hope to be able to contribute to your vision about our ancestors. First, we'll see the real definition of genocide. We will explore the lack of deliberate intent for genocide by the Spanish Empire. Then, we will examine the complex interaction between the Spanish and the indigenous civilizations. And finally, we will discuss the authorities' efforts to protect indigenous cultures through the laws of Burgos and the laws of Indias. The first argument is the word genocide, the meaning of the word, according to Raphael in 1944, is deliberate subjecting the group to living conditions calculated to cause its total or partial physical destruction, which as can be seen in this speech, does not agree with what has been done in Spanish America, and the following arguments will demonstrate this. First, we need to see the undeliberate intent to do a genocide by the Spanish Empire. There are not historical records showing that any Spanish authority explicitly expressed a hope to exterminate the indigenous people. The motivations behind the colonization were varied, and while there were instances of violence and abuse against indigenous population, there is not evidence of a systematic intent of extermination by the Spanish authorities, unlike other governments such as the United States, where the Indian Removal Act of 1813 was enacted. According to Paul Brosha in his book Great Father, the United States government and the American Indians, this law authorizes the federal government to negotiate treaties with the indigenous tribes for their displacement to territories in the western of the United States. Among the best-known authorities who support this policy, we have the President of the United States at that time, Andrew Jackson. Jackson and his followers believed that it was necessary to remove the Indians from United States territory to expand colonization westward and open land for agriculture and the exploitation of natural resources. If we compare the history, we can see that there are not records of similar laws by the Spanish Empire, and furthermore, even if they had the intention, there is a practical problem to achieve said objective. The interactions between the civilizations were varied because the Spanish people had complex objectives. The mentality of the colonists was complex and was not limited only to violence and exploitation, as Semban Todorov says in La Conquista de América, El Problema del Otro. That also include aspects such as curiosity, the desire for knowledge, and the desire to convert indigenous people to the Christianity. As Ernesto Fernandez says, or emphasize that the conquistadors were driven by a variety of factors, such as a search of wealth, the desire for fame, religious favor, and the thirst for adventure. But we must not only consider the variety of opinions of the Spanish, but we must also consider the variety of the opinion of the highest authority of Spain. The authorities of the empire had the attempt to present indigenous culture and life. They had the laws of Burgos. That were a set of laws promulgated in 1512 by King Ferdinand the Catholic, or the King Fernando, to regulate the treatment of indigenous people in Spanish colony, specifically in Hispaniola, now the Dominican Republic and Haiti. This law has as their main objective to protect indigenous people from abuse and exploitation by the Spanish colonizers, as said Pizarro Zelaya. Among the most important provisions of the law of Burgos were the following prohibition of slavery of indigenous people. The laws established that indigenous people could not be enslaved and should be treated as free subjects. The assessment of encomienda. The encomienda system was established through which indigenous lands and workers were granted to Spanish colonizers. However, it was stipulated that indigenous should be treated fairly and not be subject to excessive or abuses. The protection of the indigenous right. The existence of indigenous rights and humanity was recognized, and certain legal protections were granted to them. And we have the laws of Indias that covered a wide range of topics and regular aspects, such as colonial government, the administration of justice, the indigenous rights, the encomiendas, the land ownership, and the evangelization. This law sought to establish a legal framework that guaranteed the protection of indigenous people and their well-being. Well, I suppose with this information you think that I am lying, or with all this information you think that I am ignoring why the reduction of indigenous population. Rather than abused by Europeans, this can be explained because of biological process after the clash of all world anti-American. Like Crosby says, it has a lot of European diseases, such as smallpox, measles, and influenza, that cause a high mortality among indigenous population due to lack of immunity. He estimates that deaths from disease could have reached a significant percentage, in some cases up to 19% of the indigenous population in certain areas. Why the systematic violence? Nobody can deny the certain abuse of the encomenderos, but it's worth clarifying again that there was an active effort on the part of the Spanish authority to prevent this, and real measures such as the arrest of Columbus in 1500. Francisco Bobadilla was sent to the island Hispaniola as a royal commissioner to investigate allegations of mismanagement and abuse of power by Columbus and his brothers. Once there, Bobadilla clamped down and arrested Colon and his brothers, Diego and Bartolome, in response to the accusation against him. And well, with that, you can ask, why the destruction of the indigenous tradition? This can be explained by how cultural syncretism syncretism was carried out between the pre-Spanish world of Europe and America. An outstanding example is the work Art of the General Language of Peru, written by Jesuit priest Diego González Holguín in 1607, which is considered one of the first grammars and vocabulary of Quechua. This work reflects the effort of the Spanish to understand and document the structure and vocabulary of the Quechua language, and like that we have more examples. In conclusion, the historical evidence indicates that the Spanish authorities did not have a specific plan to carry out genocide against indigenous population. The motivations behind their actions were varied, their interactions were complex, and they had laws in place to protect indigenous people. This highlights the need for a more nuanced understanding of the Spanish colonization. Well, by closely analyzing historical events and questioning common misconceptions, we can develop a more accurate understanding